I'm back with Cheryl Kuba, who is an expert in the area of gerontology and also the area of taking care of aging parents and what to do when you're a caretaker. And we were talking about what happens to your friendships and your own social life when you have an aging parent or someone who has to have someone stay home with them. What other suggestions do you have for people who are in this situation? You had a really good one with, bring them to your house and have the events at your house, and and explain to them, about the parent you have living with you, but and just make it okay, so people don't have to feel, like they're not knowing what to do. But what other hints do you have for us?
Okay. In addition to, having events at your own home, there are a number of conferences for family caregivers that you can attend and find out so much information about this. And the great thing about these conferences is you bring your elderly parent along with you, and then there are activities in another ballroom or another room, meeting room, for them to do so that you're not joined at the hip for everything. Interestingly enough, I was able to interview a man in Chicago who had early onset Alzheimer's disease, and he was still able to communicate very well, but he was going to a support group for people with Alzheimer's disease and their caregivers, and he spoke up and said, I don't want to be in the same group as my wife, who was his caregiver. He said, I think that all of us need a separate place where, even though we have Alzheimer's disease, we can communicate with each other and with the social worker that's running the group. And my wife can be in a separate sacred place where she can talk to other family caregivers. And as a result of his input, they segregated the two groups, and it was wonderful.
How intuitive. That was really quite interesting.
Yeah.
To switch gears a little bit, though, what about the sex lives of the people that we're caring for? Do they also have a need for privacy and intimacy, or does that part of their life just go away?
Interestingly enough, it doesn't go away, and there's a lot of research and reports that say the need for intimacy at that stage of life over 50 is very strong, and the need to just be held and be cuddled is also very strong. So the need between spouses, now this is interesting because I have a gentleman who I just interviewed whose wife has Alzheimer's disease, and I asked about intimacy, and he said she's just not interested. So that's a very difficult situation because he still has his needs, and his wife is just not interested. And of course, he's not going to force the issue at all. The other piece that you run into is if somebody with dementia has gone into a care facility, they oftentimes don't remember that they're married, and they may start a new relationship up with somebody else at the community. And that's very, very difficult for the caregiving spouse who's on the outside because they're strict with their vows and committed to their vows, but then they go in and they see their husband or wife carrying on with somebody else, and that's very difficult. But there is the need for privacy, and especially if you have an elderly person who has come to live under your roof, whether it be a family member or not, a discussion needs to be had about boundaries. And never, ever should the grandparent be sharing a room with anybody else. I do know in the Asian communities and in the Hispanic communities, oftentimes grandma will be sharing the bedroom with one of the grandchildren, and it's just not healthy for either one. They both need their privacy. They're both in different stages in their lives. And to be respectful of both, they should have their own space, and if you can afford it, or if your house is constructed this way, their own bathroom too.
Well, you brought up the idea of not being interested in intimacy or taking up with someone else in the nursing home or wherever they are. And
Mm-hmm.
I know of situations where the spouse, has stayed married, but because there is no more recognition or because there is no more interest, they have gotten a girlfriend or a boyfriend, and nobody really judges them. They
Right.
they 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 have this relationship. The other person knows that they're not going to divorce the other party, and it just is what it is. And if and when the other person passes away, then they may join in a union. But this is what I'm finding a lot in today's modern world, that they're finding other partners, and there may be some people judging them, but a lot of people are not judging them because they understand.
Yeah. Well, and as people are living longer, Dr. Carson, it's not unusual for one spouse to outlive two and three spouses now.
That's true.
And if your life as it had been is really over because your spouse is in a care community and doesn't recognize and is just living in the moment day to day, what a wonderful thing that their partner is not judged. I mean, that's just a beautiful setting.
Well, and that's an ideal setting, but it's not always what happens. Um,
No,
so you say there are three things that all caregivers do to keep harmony in their homes and sanity in their lives, and I would be very interested to know what those are.
the first is take care of yourself first as the family caregiver. It's the old adage about put on your own oxygen mask first before you help a small child or an elderly person. You can't afford to let stress or heartache send you to the sidelines. How many times do we hear about a woman who's been taking care of her elderly mother for years, and then the elderly mother passes away, and oh, the daughter has breast cancer now? So
Mhm.
many times, we let our own immune systems fail or fall down just because we are taking care. So where will your elderly parent be if you don't take care of yourself? And I'll give you a good example. I interviewed a woman whose husband had been hospitalized for months, and she did all the right things. She visited him every day, but while he slept, first of all, she arrived at the hospital in a workout outfit so that while he slept, she walked around the whole campus of the hospital. So she got her exercise in, and then she brought her own healthy snacks to the hospital. She didn't eat anything out of the vending machines. She brought granola, she brought fruit, she brought everything. So she planned her day, and yet she wasn't compromising her visits to her husband at all. You really need to make a plan. And when I talk about, getting together with other family members, dietary is important too. A second thing, I don't want to get away from the second thing, is be frank and open with every member of the family. As I said before, the elder really wants to be included in all the decisions. Are we going to now segregate part of the house for them? Are we only going to let grandpa park in the driveway? And this isn't the time in family ugliness, I like to call it, when you want to bring up things of the past. When you have a sister who might say, Dad didn't care much for me when I was growing up. Why should I be involved? Let all those things go.
Yeah.
This isn't the time or the place. And, I want families to remember that often the elderly person can't help it. When they do something disruptive or when their body just won't cooperate, they can't help it. When they make a bad decision or I decide to walk downtown at midnight naked because they had a vision and they thought that was the thing to do. Their brain can't help it, and they are stuck in those bodies. And the third thing, Dr. Carson, is ask for help. You're not alone in this situation. You're going to need a break. Bring in other family members, bring in neighbors, call the church. If there are some volunteers that can come over and sit with your dad for an avenue, You've got to ask for help, and then ask for professional help. Ask for help of clergy, ask for help of care managers. There are plenty of agencies out there that have care managers that will partner with you, and they're out there to help support the family caregiver. You're not alone.
Well, those are all really, really good suggestions. And I think fortunately now, where Alzheimer's and dementia and Parkinson's diseases are more out in the open, people are more likely to share what their circumstances are. It used to be, I would say 20 years ago, people didn't talk about these things. And so, it's even like, I'm a 3-time breast cancer survivor. And when I had my first case back in 1987, it wasn't even talked about. I was the first person I did a PSA announcement, which was on the radio, and they tracked about 250 women that went and got mammograms because of that. But people, if you told them you had breast cancer, they just wrote you off. There was not really much talk about it. Now it's so open. And I think it's the same way with this. And I think that's a positive. And of course, now you've got all the commercials that say, we will in our lifetime, find a cure. But it has been really difficult to find a cure or something that even slows down dementia and Alzheimer's. There are some medications out there. But I know my husband had, I think, early dementia, and they put him on. But I think a lot of that was from some strokes. And they put him on a medication. I can't tell you that it did any good, but that was, many years ago. So I'm just curious about what you think. You studied this. There's really no way to prevent any of this, is there?
No, there isn't. A lot has to do with, as we're finding through research and through communication in the world, a lot has to do with diet and exercise. My mother had Alzheimer's disease for 8 years. Her mother had it for 10. So collectively in my household, we had 18 years of Alzheimer's disease going on. And yet my sister and I worry that it's going to be passed down through the female genes. But my sister and I have a much healthier lifestyle than my mother and my grandmother. Now, having said that, those were the women who cooked with whole milk and lard and butter and a number of things. And there were a lot of whole foods where we've now been introduced to a lot of synthetic and genetically altered food. Meet the person in the moment. Don't dwell on the fact that they have called you the wrong name 5 times. Meet them in the moment. If it's July and your mother with Alzheimer's disease is convinced that it's Christmas, go out to the dollar store and buy some trinkets and wrap them in Christmas paper and just enjoy it. And then don't ever miss the opportunity to take and celebrate those last couple things in life. Maybe a boat ride. Maybe if she wants ice cream for breakfast, go for it. There's no reason that you can't have something out of the ordinary. Don't miss that opportunity to have that last song. Don't miss that opportunity to maybe, just drive to the forest or drive to a botanical garden so that they can see the flowers. And if she's calling you by the wrong name, let it go. Don't correct them. What difference does it make?
It's funny that you talked about your mom and your grandmother. And my mother was 99 and a half when she passed away and sharp as a tack. And yet she never exercised any day in her life. We used to, my sister bought her a gym membership, which she supposedly asked for. And then she told my sister, well, I never asked you for that. Then she asked me to buy her an exercise bike. So we had it because she spent 35 winters with us. And I bought the exercise bike and it became a very expensive clothes horse.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And then when I sold it to somebody else, she said, well, why did you, I was going to use it, And she was brought up on Crisco and chicken fat. And of course, she said it was different Crisco and different chicken fat. But in reality, my mother was really never sick. and never exercised, never did anything, and was sharp as a tack. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure what is what, because first they said they're mostly intelligent people who read a lot and did a lot of research and did all these things were less likely to get Alzheimer's. Then we found that they did get Alzheimer's. And then you found people who were athletes and really did a lot of exercise. They wouldn't get it. And then they did. So I tell you, I am confused.
No, and I'm right there with you, because through my studies with my master's degrees, all through gerontology, we were working with all the research of Dr. Bernice Newgarden, who was a pioneer in the study of elderly people, gerontology, Alzheimer's disease. And what did Dr. Newgarden die of? Alzheimer's disease. So, hugely intelligent, had all the resources in the world and all the research in the world to combat it. You just don't know. We are getting smarter, but I think we're getting smarter as a society how to deal with it too.
Well, that I agree. To me, it's like with the breast cancer. They still haven't figured out how to prevent it, but they have certainly learned how to treat it. And that's a positive. And the same thing with the Alzheimer's and the dementia. They haven't decided or found out how to prevent it, but they are doing a much better job of dealing with it. And they're doing a much better job of training people to deal with it, because whether you're a caregiver from a family or a professional caregiver, the issues are very much the same in terms of dealing with the people. And so that's done a lot, I think. And also the awareness factor of people knowing that this is a part of what's going on. So where do you see the future, Cheryl? What is it that Cheryl's doing, and what is it that you see in the future?
I'd like to focus on the medical community first, in that we need so many more medical professionals to specialize in gerontology, in the research involved in cognitive brain diseases, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's disease, ALS, not ALS so much, but there are so many openings for geriatricians, because, studying the elderly and working in the medical practice for the elderly is not a sexy profession. Pediatrics is sexy, gynecology is sexy. They're not going to cure old people. I mean, they're not going to cure people from growing old. So there aren't enough medical people going into this. And that's where the big deficit is. In turn, I would encourage families to seek out geriatricians, because general practitioners just don't look at the big picture. I've talked to many families whose elderly parent is still taking the same medicine that they were taking when they were 40 years old. Nobody's done a workup on them and said, this body is now 40 years older than when they started this medicine. And a good geriatrician will pull together all of the needs. They'll look at their eyesight, they'll look at their ears, they'll look at their digestive systems, they'll look at all the medicine. And then I think there's been tremendous advances in the areas of eyesight and hearing. And I'll tell you one beautiful story about a medical advance. We had a gentleman at our church who had Parkinson's disease, and with Parkinson's comes tremors, and he shook all the time, so much that he couldn't hold a cup of juice or a cup of coffee because it would spill all over him. He went in for an operation where they put a little microprocessor in his brain, and after that, and after he was recovered, he didn't shake at all. He could walk, he could hold a cup of coffee. It was tremendous. So I'm excited about that part of it. And we are coming into being the bionic generation, where we're getting false knees and false hips and things like that, and people are living longer. But we need to focus on the quality of that life and make sure that we're not only taking care of ourselves physically, but that the folks everybody is getting out and socializing and seeing other people. Isolation and loneliness will just make diseases grow as much as possible. So I think being very inclusive, when we know that seniors are isolated. I heard an interesting comment when the 9/11 disaster happened, that we should all reach out to our elderly neighbors who may not be watching TV, because if they turn on their TV sets and find out that people are evacuating, they may think they're going to fallout shelters of the 50s and 60s, and that, and not know what's going on. So reaching out to those folks too. We're seeing these disasters now in our natural disasters, which we're in right now in Texas, but the elderly need that much more, and to be reassured socially that things are going to be okay.
That's true. And you said there was a second point that you wanted to make.
And I'll have to think of it, Dr. Carson. Maybe that little Alzheimer's is coming in on me. I don't know.
Well, we only have about 4 minutes left, Cheryl. So I just want to make sure we're covering everything that you want to get covered. Are there some things that I haven't asked you about that you would like to tell our audience?
One of the things that I would really like family caregivers to concentrate on is the communication, whether you're communicating with your family member or somebody that you drive to church. If you are noticing that there have been some changes, talk to them about it. Maybe their hands are shaking a little more, or maybe they're not hearing you. Offer to make an appointment for them and take them to an ear doctor. Or maybe you're noticing that their glasses aren't clear and you can clean them off. Or you're in their house or apartment and you notice spills around the stove. Offer, first of all, to either you can clean it up or have somebody else come and clean it up, but say, when was the last time you went to an eye doctor? I'm going to get new glasses next week. Maybe you'd like to come along. I'd be happy to drive you over there and we could make it a double appointment.
Yeah, one of the things that I really emphasize to everybody that I come in contact with and that I write about every week in my newsletter and so forth is making sure that you keep your appointments. I mean, I just got my flu shot yesterday, and I keep up on my appointments, not because I'm sick, but to prevent me from getting sick. And I get all my tests and then I'm done. I'm not a hypochondriac at all, but I get my checkups, and I go to the dentist every 3 months because I need to, for teeth cleaning. And, I still get my blood checked every 6 months now for the cancer. And I do those things because it allows me to be who I am. So it's very important. But let's tell people how to get a hold of you, Cheryl. What's the best way to get in touch with you?
I have a website called agingparentsolutions.com. And also they can email me at Kuba, which is Kuba, at agingparentsolutions.com, or Cheryl at cherylkuba.com.
Fabulous. So be sure to go to her website because there's a lot of information there. agingparentsolutions.com. Fabulous. Just fabulous. Thanks so much for being with us, Cheryl. You have just been a wealth of information.